Jack never expected to wake up to a crime scene in his own front yard. But there it was, petals ripped apart, stems broken, and freshly planted daisies stomped into the dirt as if an elephant had waltzed through. Except it wasn't an elephant. It was Karen. Again. He gripped his coffee mug tighter, watching from his porch as his neighbor, a middle-aged woman with a permanent scowl and an attitude to match, marched right through his flower bed like she was on a personal runway. Barefoot, robe swaying, completely unbothered by the destruction she left in her wake. "Morning, Jack," she called out, stepping directly onto a delicate tulip without even a glance down. Jack exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. "Karen, you're walking through my garden again." She stopped, turned, and blinked at him as if he had just spoken in an alien language. "Oh, this? It's just a shortcut. It's not a big deal." Not a big deal. That's what she said every single time. Jack had spent months perfecting that flower bed. Hours in the sun, carefully picking the right soil, watering each plant with the precision of a scientist nurturing a rare specimen. And yet, every morning, Karen treated his garden like her personal sidewalk. He tried reasoning with her. "The sidewalk is literally right there. 2 steps to your left." Karen scoffed, flipping her hand in the air dismissively. "I've lived here longer than you, sweetie. I've always walked this way. Your little flowers shouldn't be in the way." Jack gritted his teeth. "They're not in the way. They're planted. In my yard. Where they belong." But Karen was already halfway across, trampling over a patch of violets as she strutted toward the mailbox like she owned the entire street. Jack stared after her, feeling his patience unravel thread by thread. He had been polite. He had asked nicely. He had even installed a tiny fence, nothing serious, just a decorative border, to signal that this was, in fact, not a walkway. Karen had stepped over it like an Olympic hurdler and kept going without a second thought. Jack took a deep breath and looked at his yard. His beautiful flowers were a mess. Again. Enough was enough. That night, he brainstormed solutions with his best friend, Mia, who lived a few houses down. Mia, a sharp-witted woman who had zero tolerance for nonsense, nearly choked on her soda when Jack told her about Karen's latest act of floral destruction. "She what?" Mia sputtered. "She stepped over the fence? Like a human-sized cockroach?" Jack sighed, nodding. "Yep. Completely unfazed. I even put up little signs." Mia leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "Okay, but hear me out. What if she couldn't step over it?" Jack frowned. "What do you mean?" Mia grinned. "I mean, make it impossible. What's something no one in their right mind would step on?" Jack thought for a moment, then it hit him. Cacti. Spiky, unyielding, and perfectly capable of defending themselves. The more he considered it, the better it sounded. If Karen wanted to act like his yard was a free-for-all, then nature would be the one to stop her. The next day, Jack went to a nursery and picked out a collection of the most intimidating cacti he could find. He got the tall, towering ones with spines that looked like miniature swords, the short round ones covered in sharp needles, and even a few that were sneakily disguised as harmless little plants. He spent the entire afternoon planting them right along Karen's infamous shortcut. They blended in just enough with the remaining flowers, but up close, they were a minefield of pain waiting to happen. As Jack stepped back to admire his work, he spotted Mr. Thompson, his elderly neighbor, watching from his porch with an amused smirk. "That's a bold move, son," Mr. Thompson chuckled, sipping his iced tea. "You sure she won't just—" "I don't know, call the police on you for plant aggression?" Jack grinned. "If she does, I'd love to see that police report. Victim trampled unauthorized cacti while trespassing. That'd hold up real well in court." Mr. Thompson let out a wheezy laugh. "Well, this ought to be good." Jack barely slept that night, anticipation keeping him awake. He imagined it over and over. Karen, her usual smug stride, her dismissive wave of the hand, and then bam. The realization. The sharp, unforgiving bite of reality, delivered straight to her bare feet. Morning came, and Jack positioned himself on the porch, coffee in hand, pretending to scroll through his phone. Right on schedule, Karen appeared. Still in her robe. Still barefoot. Still completely unaware. She marched forward, her expression bored, her pace confident. Then, the second her foot hit the first cactus, the reaction was instant. A piercing scream shattered the peaceful morning air. Karen leaped back so violently that she nearly toppled over, her arms flailing as she tried to regain balance. Her face contorted in shock and agony as she hopped on one foot, gripping the other, which was now adorned with several tiny spines. "What the?" she shrieked, staring at the ground like it had personally betrayed her. Jack took a slow, satisfying sip of his coffee. "Morning, Karen." Her head snapped up, eyes blazing. "What is this?" Jack feigned confusion, gesturing toward his yard. "My new garden. Beautiful, isn't it?" Karen's face turned red, and for a moment, Jack genuinely thought steam might come out of her ears. You did this on purpose." He raised an innocent eyebrow. "Did what? Plant plants? In my yard? How terrible of me." Karen opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again like a fish gasping for air. She looked down at her foot, still covered in cactus needles, then back at Jack, who continued to sip his coffee with the composure of a man who had just won the greatest battle of his life. Finally, she huffed, turned sharply, and limped away, one shoe still stuck in the cactus patch. Jack watched her retreat, a victorious smirk forming on his lips. But as he leaned back in his chair, something in Karen's posture made him pause. She wasn't just angry. She was plotting. Jack knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And so, the battle between man and Karen had truly begun. Jack barely had time to savor his victory before Karen launched her counterattack. The morning after her unfortunate encounter with the cacti, she stormed out of her house, still limping slightly but with a new level of determination in her scowl. Jack watched from his porch as she took careful, deliberate steps toward the HOA office at the end of the street. He had seen that march before. It was the same one she used when she complained about people leaving their trash cans out for too long or when a neighbor dared to paint their shutters a color she deemed unacceptable. This time, Jack had no doubt who her complaint was about. Sure enough, later that afternoon, an HOA representative named Mr. Benson, a grumpy, self-important man with a clipboard permanently attached to his hand, showed up at Jack's doorstep. Jack leaned casually against the doorframe, already prepared for the nonsense that was about to spill from Benson's mouth. "We've received a complaint," Mr. Benson announced, flipping through his papers as if he were reviewing evidence for a court trial. "It seems you've installed a hazardous obstacle in your yard that is causing safety concerns for the community." Jack smirked. "You mean my plants?" Mr. Benson narrowed his eyes. "You planted cacti directly in the path that Ms. Karen has traditionally used." Jack took a slow sip of his lemonade. "Traditionally used? Since when is my yard part of public property?" Mr. Benson stiffened. "Ms. Karen claims that she has been walking that way for years, and your recent landscaping choice has resulted in injury. The HOA requires all homeowners to maintain a safe and welcoming environment." Jack chuckled, crossing his arms. "Oh, I see. So, I'm required to make sure my garden is welcoming to trespassers? Should I also install a red carpet and a juice bar for her convenience?" Mr. Benson pursed his lips. "That's not what I'm saying." Jack tilted his head. "So, let me get this straight. I planted legal, natural vegetation in my yard, on my property, and now I'm being told I have to remove it because one person refuses to use the actual sidewalk." Mr. Benson adjusted his glasses, clearly uncomfortable. "If a plant is deemed hazardous, we have the right to request its removal." Jack resisted the urge to laugh. "Right. And how many other homeowners on this street have cactus gardens?" Mr. Benson hesitated, looking down at his clipboard. Jack leaned forward slightly. "You know what I think? I think Karen is throwing a tantrum because, for once, she didn't get her way. And now, instead of telling her to stop walking through private property like a normal person, you're trying to punish me for fixing a problem she created. Mr. Benson sighed, rubbing his temple. I understand your frustration, but rules are rules. You have 1 week to remove the cacti, or you'll be fined. Jack's jaw clenched, but he forced himself to remain calm. He knew the HOA loved handing out fines like candy on Halloween, and he wasn't about to let Karen win this round. If she wanted to play dirty, so could he. That night, Jack sat at his desk, flipping through the HOA handbook. He read each section carefully, searching for anything that would give him an edge. After an hour of dry legal jargon, his eyes landed on a specific clause. Decorative rock gardens featuring native desert plants were not only permitted but encouraged as an eco-friendly landscaping choice. Jack grinned. He didn't have to remove the cacti. He just had to expand the idea. The next day, Jack got to work. He ordered bags of decorative gravel, larger drought-resistant plants, and a few strategically placed boulders. He went beyond just cacti, adding agave plants, desert roses, and yucca. He even installed a tasteful wooden sign that read, "Protected Native Garden, a Please Do Not Disturb." By the time he was finished, the front yard no longer looked like a simple flower bed. It was a fully realized desert oasis, completely within HOA guidelines. Jack leaned against his shovel, admiring his handiwork. It was beautiful, functional, and best of all, untouchable by any ridiculous HOA fines. Karen, of course, was furious. That evening, Jack caught sight of her peering at his yard from her driveway, arms crossed tightly. He could practically hear her brain overheating as she tried to figure out how to undo what he had done. But she wasn't the type to give up easily. He had humiliated her once, and she was clearly plotting her next move. Jack didn't have to wait long to see what it was. Around midnight, he woke up to the sound of rustling outside his window. Peering through the blinds, he spotted a shadowy figure crouching near his cactus garden. He grabbed his phone, flipped on his security camera app, and zoomed in. There she was, Karen, armed with a pair of gardening gloves and a flashlight, trying to rip out his cacti. Jack shook his head, both amused and annoyed. He tapped the microphone button on his security camera and spoke through the built-in speaker. "Nice night for some trespassing, huh, Karen?" Karen screamed, dropping the cactus she had been wrestling with. She whirled around, eyes wide, her flashlight fumbling in her hands. I was just... Jack grinned. "Stealing my plants? Damaging my property?" "Both." Karen scrambled to her feet, waving a dismissive hand. "I was, trying to make the neighborhood look better. These cacti are dangerous." Jack laughed. "Oh sure. Because tearing them out with your bare hands is the safest way to go about it." Karen huffed, shoving her flashlight into her pocket. "You can't prove I was." Jack tapped his phone screen. "Smile for the camera, Karen. You're live on 3 different security feeds." Karen paled, glancing around as if suddenly realizing that yes, security cameras do exist. Without another word, she turned and bolted toward her house, nearly tripping over her own feet in the process. The next morning, Jack sent the footage to Mr. Benson at the HOA, along with a simple message. "I believe we need to discuss safety concerns regarding trespassers." The response came quickly. Mr. Benson requested a meeting with Karen to address the matter. That afternoon, Jack watched with unfiltered joy as Karen was called into the HOA office. The look on her face was priceless. She had been so focused on removing his plants that she hadn't realized she was digging her own grave. When she returned, she didn't so much as glance in Jack's direction. Instead, she stomped into her house, slamming the door so hard that a nearby wind chime fell off its hook. Jack smiled to himself. The battle had taken an interesting turn. Karen had gone from an overconfident menace to a desperate trespasser in just a matter of days. But something told him she still wasn't done. She had lost this round. But the war? The war wasn't over yet. Jack knew Karen wouldn't go down without a fight. She had been humiliated, caught red-handed trespassing on his property, and exposed to the very HOA she had tried to weaponize against him. But instead of learning her lesson and backing off, Karen did what she always did, she doubled down. The very next morning, Jack spotted her in front of her house, huddled with a small group of neighbors. He recognized a few of them as HOA loyalists, the kind of people who enforced rules with clipboard enthusiasm and took great pleasure in measuring the length of grass blade. Karen was gesturing wildly toward his yard, her voice rising with a mix of frustration and fake concern. Jack didn't need to hear what she was saying to know her plan. She was rallying her troops. Sure enough, within the hour, Mr. Benson arrived again, this time flanked by 2 other HOA board members. Jack sighed, putting down his gardening gloves and strolling over to meet them at the edge of his property. Mr. Benson cleared his throat, his expression unreadable. Jack, the board has reviewed the latest complaint. Jack folded his arms. Let me guess. Karen is now claiming my garden is a public nuisance. One of the board members, a woman named Mrs. Caldwell, nodded. There have been multiple complaints about the cacti being a danger to pedestrians. Jack raised an eyebrow. Pedestrians? The only person walking through here is Karen, and last I checked, trespassing doesn't make you a pedestrian. It makes you a problem. Mr. Benson sighed, clearly tired of being in the middle of this mess. Regardless, the HOA has to take neighborhood concerns seriously. Jack held up his phone. You mean concerns like trespassing? Because I have video evidence of Karen entering my property in the middle of the night and attempting to vandalize my garden. I'm more than happy to take this to an attorney. That made Benson pause. The other 2 board members exchanged glances. Jack knew they weren't expecting him to fight back with hard evidence. HOA rules were one thing, but legal battles? That was another. Mrs. Caldwell shifted uncomfortably. Jack, we understand your frustration, but... A new voice interrupted. Actually, I think Jack has a very strong case. Everyone turned to see Mr. Thompson, the retired lawyer from down the street, strolling up with his hands in his pockets. He was wearing his usual sun hat, his expression casual but sharp. Jack hid his smile. He hadn't expected backup, but if anyone could shut down HOA nonsense, it was Mr. Thompson. Mr. Thompson gestured toward the board members. Now, I've been living here long enough to know the HOA rules inside and out, and I recall a very specific clause about repeated trespassing. Something about a homeowner's right to protect their property. Mrs. Caldwell's face tightened. That's not. Oh, but it is, Mr. Thompson interrupted smoothly. See, if someone is repeatedly caught violating property boundaries, they forfeit their right to file HOA complaints about that same property. Keeps people from abusing the system to harass their neighbors. Jack blinked. He had been looking through the rulebook for loopholes, but somehow he had missed this particular gem. Mr. Thompson just smirked, clearly enjoying the moment. Mr. Benson frowned. That is technically true. Karen, who had been watching the exchange from her porch, stormed over in outrage. You can't be serious. He planted dangerous plants on purpose. Mr. Thompson shrugged. On his own property. Which he has every right to do. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a malfunctioning ventriloquist dummy. He set a trap. Jack finally spoke up, his voice as calm as ever. If I set a trap, Karen, then I guess my entire yard is a trap. Maybe the sidewalk is a trap too. Maybe trees are traps. Should I get rid of my mailbox because you might stub your toe on it? Karen's face turned an alarming shade of red. This is harassment. Mr. Benson pinched the bridge of his nose, clearly regretting every life choice that had led him to this moment. Karen, based on the evidence provided, I don't believe we can enforce any action against Jack. Karen gasped. But what about my foot? I was injured. Jack smirked. And whose fault is that? Karen glared at him, but her usual bravado was fading. The board members weren't backing her up, and she knew it. She was running out of options. Mrs. Caldwell, who had looked ready to argue moments ago, now seemed eager to wrap up the conversation. Jack's cactus garden is compliant with HOA landscaping regulations. If there are no further violations, I think we should consider this matter closed. Jack could practically see the defeat settle into Karen's shoulders. She had lost. Karen huffed, spinning on her heel and stomping back toward her house. Unfortunately for her, she had forgotten about the single loose cactus pad that had fallen off during her late-night trespassing attempt. Her foot landed directly on it. The scream that followed was glorious. Jack watched as she hopped on one foot, yanking out tiny spines while cursing under her breath. A few neighbors chuckled from their driveways. Even Mr. Benson struggled to keep a straight face. Karen finally yanked off her shoe, threw it at her porch in frustration, and disappeared inside her house. Mr. Thompson clapped Jack on the back. "Well, that was fun." Jack grinned. "That was the highlight of my week." As the board members awkwardly excused themselves, Jack leaned against his porch railing, watching the street return to normal. For the first time in weeks, he felt a real sense of victory. The next morning, he stepped outside to water his plants, half expecting Karen to make some last-ditch effort to retaliate. But instead, he saw something even better. Karen was walking on the sidewalk, for the first time ever. Jack smiled to himself. Nature always found a way.